Welcome back to Building for Others, the podcast where you have to make something that is actually used by other people in the real world in order to be invited. So, no hype, no vaporware, real things used by real people. Today, we have Simon, and Simon is joining us from Hitachi Vantara. And Simon, you are probably much better than I am at introducing yourself and telling your story. So, I'd like to hand it over to you and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks for the introduction. Very happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Simon Ninan. I am head of strategy for Hitachi Vantara. But at Hitachi, which is a very well-known industrial conglomerate, $70 billion company, I also wear another hat. I am on the corporate strategy team for the parent company. So I wear these two hats simultaneously, and I think it's been very interesting for me because it helps me understand the role of Hitachi Vantara and data management and storage and that IT infrastructure in the context of what it means for the bigger industrial conglomerate. You said something really interesting in your introduction when you said real things for real people. And that's IT for the real world, where IT goes beyond just the bits and bytes and actually has the interaction with the physical world. So I'm sure we'll get to talk about that, but that's the really interesting part of my job, trying to make sure that we connect the dots between IT and everything else that's happening in the world.
And
Um,
can we just dive into that a little bit,
Please, yeah.
Simon? So can you just tell us a little bit about how those two are connected, both from like the global company Hitachi, and then also what Vantara is doing to drive the overarching strategy for themselves, and then for Hitachi Global.
Yeah, perfect. So just for size and scale context, Hitachi Vantara is the Silicon Valley headquartered, basically the IT and digital data management arm of Hitachi Limited. Hitachi Limited describes its strategy. Now, it's a 115-year-old company, been around for a long time. And by the way, I'll just throw in something here that's really interesting. Despite being a 115-year-old company, it regularly features in the list of the top 30 to 40 most innovative companies in the world. Now, that's something interesting because you usually think of older companies as being heavy and slow-moving dinosaurs, but this is a company that is highly innovative. And I think this model tries to bring it to bear. So let me explain. Um, Hitachi's strategy is stated as delivering value. And in fact, I'll come back to like a big picture piece of it, but it's delivering value through the combination of OT, which is operational technology, IT, which is information technology, and products, which means a variety of physical products that are produced by the company, real world, right? And so this mesh, if you think of a Venn diagram, it's the intersection between the physical world and the digital world. That's Industry 4.0 to you. And Hitachi has been leading the charge on that for a very, very long time. Right. So when you think of, okay, so we are a data management storage company, we provide storage appliances and infrastructure solutions that get positioned in enterprises and data centers. It is not just IT for IT's sake. It is IT to be able to be connected to vertical applications and outcomes. Most IT companies think of themselves as horizontals, purely horizontals. We provide the horizontal value, but for us, the real power comes when we can connect those IT solutions to business outcomes through vertical integration.
Can you
So
give us
that
an example of that?
yeah. So Hitachi has a solution that was officially branded HMAX a couple of years ago. That's HMAX, and essentially it was launched in the rail industry. So you have these big trains, and Hitachi makes not just the trains, but the tracks, the transmission lines, the operations, like all of it, and the mobility as a service kind of operational and management system. In that context, you can think of it as being, okay, very, very physical world stuff. I know how this runs in the real world. But today, that industry is being completely transformed by digital and data. Every part of the train, for example, has sensors on it, right? Has digital connectivity. It's generating a massive amount of data from the tracks, from the train, from the lines, all of it, from the booking stations and all of it. The ability to kind of surface this data, collate them in the form of aggregated big data and digital assets, be orchestrated and managed through software with an AI applied for predictive maintenance, modeling, and so on, to be able to say you're managing an entire fleet, you're managing a train system, you're able to actually drive efficiencies and make sure that trains arrive and depart on time. which then has cascading impacts through the entire ecosystem. Now that's data, that's digital, that's kind of like being served up now to be able to drive real-time, real-world operations.
I mean, so that's soup to nuts. You guys are sitting across that
Correct.
entire stack, like
Yeah.
Exactly.
everything from literally the train infrastructure all the way through what is
Correct.
being serviced in terms of data insights.
And Hitachi is one of the companies that can actually uniquely do that, right? It's like the if you say what's the secret sauce, Hitachi always says that the secret sauce is its domain knowledge, which means understanding how things work on the ground, like every process, every broken rivet, and the impact that it can have, every operational impact on the downstream. If you have that, being able to connect to not just the real world physical devices and operations, but then to effectively use the data and the data infrastructure behind it is really, really powerful.
I mean, you see
So
that as like in vogue more now with, you know, some of the Chinese companies where they're
Correct.
owning the entire vertical stack. But it's cool to hear that
Yeah.
Hitachi's been doing that before it was
Oh, yeah.
cool, right?
And by the way, I think you've heard this even at big conferences like NVIDIA GTC.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
yeah,
Jensen made
yeah.
a statement that said the future of AI is vertically integrated. I'm like, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that decision making process look? There's some part of the stack that you can either make it yourself or you're going to go with the vendor. Like, does Hitachi have a unique approach on like how they do that decision making?
Actually, very good question, right? So if you think of, for example, very large purely IT providers of the nature of, say, like a Microsoft or, hyperscalers or, a variety of players, like even say a ServiceNow. Now, these are IT providers that want to work with us, right? So they become an essential part of the ecosystem. By the way, Hitachi makes and generates a lot of products, right? And we do a lot of services as well. But no one can do a full stack entirely by themselves. Solutions are provided by ecosystems. That's been a foundational belief from the start, right? So we have to say what is closed, meaning what is core to our technology, what is adjacent to closed in the sense that there's unique technology that is jointly developed by us plus an ecosystem vendor, so no one else gets it. We build it together and we deliver it only together exclusively. And then what's the open ecosystem that we can kind of plug into, right? So yeah, there's a very elaborate build versus buy versus partner kind of decision making that's embedded in that. Yeah. And by the way, I gave you the rail example, but I can throw out examples for energy. For example, the smart grid is like a huge area of focus, especially, given the challenges and constraints of AI. It's not just the grid itself, but the grid is impacted by a host of external factors like weather, right? Like natural disasters and things like that. And you're saying, hey, you put all this data together. AI is capable today of very large, very, very complex multivariate analysis that humans were not previously capable of, right? And so when you're combining all that data, being able to process it through a high performance GPU architecture with distributed data at scale, right? Now you're actually saying, hey, listen, real world impact, which is energy forecast, demand, maintenance, all of that stuff, now being powered by an AI stack that delivers data and data pipelines. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been doing AI for a lot longer than ChatGPT, that's for sure. So if there's kind of new kids on the block, and you have to
Yeah, yeah.
retain that
Yeah, yeah.
innovation.
And listen, I think the evolution of AI, we're talking about Gen AI, large language models, we're talking about agentic, both very, very powerful capabilities that we're also absorbing and using along with these trends. But the one trend that I think we're ahead of, right, that we have been ahead of for a while is the next big wave for physical AI. Because this is the intersection of the physical world and the digital world, right? That's essentially what it is, where you actually have real world language models, physical language models, the ability to process multimodal data and say the relationship between sound and visual and physical robotic movements and smell and
Right.
environment conditions and putting all this together and saying we can match this up
Well,
in a way that
yeah, that's like interesting because now putting some of the pieces together for me, it's you guys have, because you're sitting across the entire vertical stack, you have a unique vantage point of getting
correct,
all of
correct.
that interesting physical data. So is Hitachi in the business of like building world models? Like, are you
Yes.
guys going to build and train your own models?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And we have partnerships for that as well, but Hitachi is building its own world model. Again, massive amount of simulations, lab testing, proof of concepts and all of that underway, right? And uh it's very interesting. I study some of the robotics use cases that they're playing with, and how they optimize the movement of a robot so that the reaction time goes down, by 90% just by the tweaking of an algorithm. Like it's pretty fascinating how this world is going to evolve.
Well, I know that, like, the luminary, like, Yann LeCun is of
Yep.
the mindset that, like, world model building and access to the physical reality is kind of one of the last remaining steps towards actual
That's correct.
AGI. So I don't know, maybe you guys get there first. Um, to the degree that you can share, like, what is on the horizon there that you guys would release, or actually, are you guys just doing this internally for use internally at Hitachi and Hitachi Vantara?
No, it's listen. Hitachi is this customer zero, so it would always be piloted here first, done internally first, and then we take it to the market. But everything has a commercial, at the end of the day, angle to it, right? Which is how we're going to create value in the real world. Right. So, yeah, sure. Like when you talk about robotics, it's robotics within our factories, right? So that we can make our assembly lines, move faster. But it's also robotics that we provide as physical products or services for our customers as well, right? So, um, the Hitachi strategy, as I described it earlier, was when they launched this thing called HMAX, which is, just think of it as a full stack physical devices, IT, hardware, pipes, and all of that connected to data management, connected to orchestration and LLMs and the foundation models, including physical foundation models, to the real world applications. That is, the whole stack is now being called HMAX. And I think the way we describe it is we're creating HMAX for rail, HMAX for energy, HMAX for data centers, HMAX for automotive. So it's being rolled out in phases like that to be able to say it's a whole set of use cases that can be provided through this vertically integrated structure.
What about clients or customers that have part of that stack already built out for themselves? They're like, "Hey, we only want some of what you guys
Yeah.
are offering, not the full
Yeah.
thing."
Yeah, it's a platform model at the end of the day, right? It's a highly flexible thing. So yeah, we can provide all the parts of it, or we can provide a subset of it and work in integration with others. That happens right through that at any point of play, any point in the stack, you can actually modify that. So for example, we can do this for our own trains, or we can apply the platform to trains built by others as well, because the framework is in place to surface and run that data. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like very interesting. So, one of the tenets that we really believe, one of our pillars at elvex is kind of freedom of choice in a world where we find a lot of people feel like they're locked in to have to be an OpenAI shop or a Anthropic shop or a
That's right.
Gemini shop. We think that's actually a false choice, and that you should be able to like work on top of anything you want, including open weight models and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
it does sound like that is kind of a similar thing that you're offering here, where you're saying, like, listen, we do have this full stack built out, but we can be agnostic and you guys can bring your
That's
own
right.
stuff if you want.
That's right. Listen, that applies through the stack from an IT perspective in particular. We have been speaking for the last few years about, the concept of hybrid and multi-domain. Data at the end of the day is going to be highly distributed. It's not going entirely to the public cloud. It's not entirely on premise. You're going to have the necessity to manage across multiple environments. Even single use cases will require data mobility across of these, right? Or the ability to say, rather than moving data, can I orchestrate in a way that can get the right data from the right place at the right time? It's all in place, but then is being orchestrated through a GPU data orchestration framework, right? And so that, to your point, then if we apply MCP, model context protocols, to kind of like do the arbitration and orchestration around it. So regardless of where the data sits, we can make sure that it's used. See, at that IT level as well is where, and we have in Hitachi Vantara, the product that we offer is called Hitachi IQ and Hitachi IQ Studio. Let me just describe the two parts of it. It's part of our AI portfolio. Q is basically just think of it as a converged AI stack. It is built on the back of NVIDIA GPUs. We're certified with NVIDIA, right? But then you're bringing the servers with the cooling and all of that stuff. You're bringing storage, both structured data, unstructured data, a platform to kind of manage across them with high performance. Actually, the ability to manage according to a t-shirt size or the scale of the customer's requirements, and then scaling this from very small models to very large, right? So you've got a converged IT infrastructure there. IQ Studio is a
For
software
that
that
first
you
one, before you get to the
sure.
studio, what is like the customer problem that is solving? So like what if somebody wants to leverage IQ, what are they like purchasing that for?
Yeah. So first of all, it's think of the fundamental challenge in the ecosystem being the delivery of AI ROI and faster time to ROI, right? So one of the things, by the way, that I talk about a lot is we're seeing the evolution of personas in the context of AI. Previously, IT buying was purely the domain of IT. Like it's complex, it's technical. Nobody gets in the way. Like the business will ship a requirement over the wall. IT makes a decision that says, I'm getting you this much capacity. This is the best price I was able to negotiate at. Take it, use it, right? But when you saw over the last year a lot of conversation happening around, hey, where is the ROI? That ROI is not an IT responsibility. That ROI sits under the line of business. So you're having the line of business now talking more to IT and saying, how can we work together to deliver a use case with the best application and business side as well as IT side? Like how can that combination work in tandem?
And I think the most interesting evolution of that we're seeing is that that's actually working itself out in the financials too, where
Correct.
IT is no longer taking over the line item of AI. It's getting placed under the business units where they have to justify the
That is
spend.
that is 100% correct. But it is, and it's changing the financials, it's changing the commercial model. It's also changing the nature of the conversation that we have with people. Now, of course, you talk about things like vibe coding and all of that. Business people are becoming more familiar with now operating in these environments that were previously walled off as technical environments because it's been made much easier.
Hmm.
You're seeing the evolution of this, what I call the BizTech buyer, right? Which is like just a persona that straddles both worlds comfortably. That is now the new persona that we have to try to sell to, right?
Yeah.
In many conversations with customers over the last years, I'm seeing them struggle with that transition. Like the traditional storage people, unable to kind of like think out of their box, but knowing that the world is changing around them. The world is being eaten from both sides, right? And so we've got to be able to say, how do we help them up level their skills and conversation, but how do we put tools in their hand that actually makes it easy for them to justify value, to kind of, bridge across functional stakeholder group, etc. Yeah,
We see a lot of the same things where, like, yes, a lot of CTOs and CIOs are coming to us because they've been handed the AI problem, figure out how to do this.
correct,
We also
correct.
see a lot of like COOs, people in ops who are showing up and they're not technical.
That's
And
right.
probably my favorite part about it is that like they will have some sort of AI center of excellence team
Yep,
or whatnot, and it'll be a classic ops person who said, I started using elvex or started using AI, and I am getting technical in ways that, maybe
that's right.
some engineers look with some
That's right.
skepticism, but, it's changing their careers
That's
actively and
correct.
quickly. And it's
That's
kind of
correct.
fascinating to see that
Yeah.
kind of merging happen.
Yeah. So to your question, right? What's the value of it? It's a converged stack. It makes it easy to kind of, when you have requirement scoped, makes it easy to take those business requirements and convert it into a IT architecture and a stack that then becomes, easy to scale, highly integratable, interoperable, right? Things like that. And then that's where IQ Studio comes into the picture. And this is what we launched our first version in November of last year and then had a big release in March this year. So that was the big announcement we were making. Think of IQ Studio as being it's a low code, no code agent builder with a lot of pre-built blueprints, automations, integrations, MCP, as well as when I say pre-built blueprints, it's not just the technical blueprints, but we've also pre-built several algorithms for RAG pipelines for specific scenarios. For example, for trucking and fleet management. There are Hitachi research and R&D has built these things over time, way before the LLM revolution, and has perfected over a long period of time. We folded those in now into the software platform. So not just can you use it to kind of quickly spin up agents in a governed and highly secure way, you're able to now connect it also to your vertical applications, your industry, and so on. So it's pretty powerful. There's many places that this can go, but I see this as kind of like being an essential glue layer to work between the underlying infrastructure and the overlying applications.
And this might sound like a redundant question, but I think it's like important. for IQ Studio,
Yep.
is like the one of the pieces of core value that it will like automatically slot into the rest of the Vantara stack, or is it something that like people are purchasing separate, like they could use it with what, just because like I think it's interesting to note, because I think about the trucking example, my assumption is that, oh, you, if they're already using what you guys have built across the stack, then it's easy to just like get going with a snap of your fingers, versus like maybe slotting something in that isn't in the
Yeah.
Vantara stack.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's an evolution path for that, right? Certainly, the big dollars and the big margins and all of that come from when we pull our product through, right? So the more effectively IQ says, hey, it's delivering this value on its own, but the value is best delivered because guess what? We have the best integrated stack to be able to do that, and speed to ROI and all of that good stuff. Can it, in theory, sit across a much more heterogeneous environment and plug into a whole bunch of other things? Absolutely, right? And that would be on the evolution path.
Yeah. But it does sound like, when you guys, when I guess this is a question, when you guys launched it in November and then did the like updated launch in March, was it a target for current customers or was it net new customers you were going?
Absolutely both, and we've seen a huge influx of both. We are taking it to existing customers that are saying, "Hey, we're on this path. Help us now, kind of upgrade to AI." But then the other is new customers. This is like a foot in the door conversation these days. If you're not speaking AI, you're not in the conversation, right? So it's basically going to those customers that saying, I want AI, but I don't know how to do it. You guys seem to not just have a knowledge of how to do it, but you've got a unique, innovative approach that actually helps connect my business and IT, help me figure this out, right? And so that's pretty unique for us.
Let's get
And
into some of the details with it. Like, what is powering the actual LLMs in this case? Is it, a specific model you guys are working with? Is it across the board, different
It's
model?
across the board, right? We've got MCP kind of set up for that. So there's a deliberate approach we've taken, make sure that this can work in essentially in a fairly horizontal platform like fashion. Yeah.
And then who is the target end user for this?
So in this, for example, the initial use cases were built for DevOps users, right? Because they will tend to build a lot of their agents in the context of IT ops and DevOps. But then, of course, this now, because of the kind of algorithms and so on that we're talking about, this can be applied to any kind of operator, right? And people that are sitting at that BizTech intersection.
and how inventive are they getting? You mentioned that it comes kind of preloaded with a bunch of, your own best
Yeah,
practices or
yeah,
workflows or whatnot. Are
yeah.
they kind of just implementing that, or are you seeing people make up stuff that you never would have expected?
People need help, I think, to get across the line. I think that's how they're starting. We're still like the industry is moving very fast, but a lot of the big enterprises that we speak to, just to be clear, we serve a lot of mission critical enterprises. So more than 50% of our customers are very large banks, right? These are like Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, Global 2000 customers, right? So it's banks, it's healthcare companies, it's governments. Those are the bulk of our customers. And then we've got a whole lot, bunch of others in manufacturing and in energy and so on. With that kind of customer, they're very forward thinking in some areas, but they're also very cautious in terms of how they try to put things together, right? So there will be potentially an extended phase of POCs where they're validating things like governance and security and compliance and all of that stuff. So it's working through that, right? And I think we start with some foundational use cases, but we're able to push the boundary a little bit in terms of saying, hey, there's what's the art of the possible and what can fit into your roadmap over time. By the way, this is another powerful thing about like the one Hitachi, we call it one Hitachi, right? But the one Hitachi approach. Hitachi has a division called GlobalLogic that we acquired about 4 or 5 years ago. It's a product engineering kind of shop, right? Custom for various, brand new use cases, like something that's never been done before, etc. They've got a design consulting arm in there that actually works with us. We call it our AI discovery service. But if a customer is like trying to nail down exactly what their value case is, what's the ROI, what would the customer journey look like, what's a phased rollout of use cases, we bring them into the discussion and then together in the room, figure out what's the problem, how we're going to try to solve it, and infrastructure happens to be on the path. Jensen, right? So that's one motion where we're saying, start with a big problem and then put all the building blocks together. And by the way, here's infrastructure, the best, for your need. There's another kind of customer, which
And
is
it
more
just
like,
so happens
please.
that the more that they put on you, the better it is for you and them. So it's like, it makes sense, right?
Of
Yeah.
course. Listen, I think we also bring, because of the nature of how we're trying to design and orchestrate this, we're designing it to be heterogeneous. We're designing it to be inclusive, right? Which I think it's almost like going in with a pitch that says, our architecture will allow you to use this even if you don't use our product as a background. But if you use our product, all the better for you.
I love it because it's very confident stance, right? It's
Correct.
like, listen, you
Right.
can use whatever you want, but if you do use us, it's going to be better, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
That's great. One of the theses that I'm thinking through in my head about this space is really how generative AI LLMs are kind of driving through the consumerization of
Yep.
enterprise software. And what I mean by that is that, like, if you think about like the governance side of the equation here,
Yep.
you kind of have this is like with startups, right? So you kind of have startups tackling this space from two angles. One is like purely on the governance security side. Hey,
Yep.
we're going to give you like the best security and governance. If you're going to roll AI out through your organization, we'll have like all these permissioning and identities built into agents, and they're going to have like this really clear way that IT and your CIO and your CISO can thumbs up and like roll this stuff out. Then you have the other end of the equation where this is like more of the digital employee, digital persona camp where, hey, as a user, you want to be able to onboard all these agents and help them get your job done. But
Yep.
actually, it's like both of those things need to happen. And I feel like companies that either over engineer for one or the other are kind of missing the boat. Like
Yeah.
you have to walk that fine line where it's like you have the right governance that is going to get the right approval and the thumbs up from the key stakeholders here, but you can't be so far down that path that it actually introduces way more friction for your users than it does to actually help them get their job done. So you still have to be on the user side of like having
Yeah.
something that's
Yeah.
engaging, having something that's easy to like step up and use and drive through the organization. So I'm wondering, like, does that make sense to you? Is that something you're seeing
Yeah.
in the space too?
No, I think you characterized that well. I recall, so you remember like the big agentic point of truth, a big boom kind of discussion started to happen immediately after the release of OpenClaw and Moltbook and all of that stuff, right? I remember right about that time, this is the February, March timeframe, I was speaking to a room full of CIOs. And when we talked about the risks related to agentic security and how it kind of creates a massive amount of exposure, we took a poll, right? Show of hands in the room. How many of you would allow people to kind of operate with their agents, but then try to kind of like, as as they're working through it, put all the necessary controls in place, identify a risk, close the risk, identify another risk, close the risk. Do you know that the majority of the CFOs and the CIOs in the room, which is 70% of those in the room, actually said they would shut down their access to agents completely because the risk was too high?
Mm-hmm.
That was very interesting and very telling, right? And I think in Silicon Valley, sometimes we need to hear some of these perspectives sometimes, right? What's at stake? Even a company has, or any company, right, can institute very, very strong enterprise level controls. But when you say when you're telling your organization, your individuals, go crazy with the agentic, like there's so many things that you can do when you say I'm opening it up and like I'm going to install the terminal and I'm going to build my own agents and I'm going to download third-party skills. Guess what? The majority of vibe coded apps that have been created by individuals in enterprises, 60% of them have been shown to have day one vulnerabilities.
Right.
Day zero vulnerabilities. Okay, so critical stuff that needs to be fixed because otherwise it's exposing PII. It's highly risky. But in addition to that, right, I think the nature of the attacks are actually coming through. You're downloading a third-party skill. You're actually connecting to something on GitHub, and it's been poisoned, and you don't know
Right.
it, right? And now
And
it's
all of a sudden,
infiltrating.
all your data is exfiltrated by like
Correct.
a single
Correct.
prompt. Right.
And
Yeah.
what happened to the enterprise? What's the linkage between the enterprise control and what the individuals are being able to do? It's all bypassing that control. When people realize that risk, they're like, okay, we need to do things very, very, very carefully.
But the flip
Yeah,
side of that is that you also could, I think like what there also is a realization of is you can't just like say, hey, we aren't going to be in a
correct.
world of autonomous agents, because if
That's
you
right.
do that, you're going to end
Yeah,
up losing the race to like
that's
a
right.
startup that is up and coming. That's
That's
like,
right.
yeah, we are going to be more risky because we think the
That's
risk
right.
is worth it.
That's right. So it depends on the type of enterprise. It depends on the type of data that you have, but it also means there are certain basic things that you can do to kind of like, protect, right? And one of the things that CIOs kind of aligned on was the importance of human in the loop,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
rather than letting agents have completely at it, where is your point of someone looking at it, someone validating it, but also someone taking accountability for it? And by the way, this accountability question is an interesting one. Even in our own organization, we're having the same discussion. When things go right with AI, fantastic. But when things break and when there's a
Who's
breach or there's
responsible?
something, who's responsible? Who gets
Yeah,
fired? Like
right.
now, I speaking
You
a little
fire the agent. That's no problem.
correct, right? But this is the philosophical thing, right? Whenever we create, we're directly calling these agents over here, but you can think of like a variety of other use cases out in the world where people create these intermediary things, like, for example, drones in the military, right? And so on. What you're doing is you're creating a level of separation of accountability. And so ultimately, when something goes wrong, you're like, oops, sorry, not my fault, not anyone's fault, but it is someone's fault, right? When you act, if you're in the customer service business, if you have real customers that you really care for, customer business hinges on trust, especially for someone like a company like us. Trust is very, very difficult to build but very easy to break. It's fragile, right? And so protecting that and making sure that we are able to kind of like bridge those controls is one of the most important endeavors we can have.
This is one of the ongoing debates I have with our CTO, because one of the biggest bottlenecks we have in terms of just developing our own product actually is code reviews.
Yep.
Because that ends up being the area where, yes, you can generate a lot of code through AI,
Yep.
but like our CTO is very insistent on having a human do the code review. And I'm always pushing him, like, but do we really need that? Do we really? He's like, listen, we absolutely need that for two reasons. One, there are so many things we find wrong with AI generating whatever it's trying to generate for
Yep.
our applications and features. And so that's one huge reason.
Mhm.
Two is actually, there's three. Two is that we need to make sure that our team understands
Yep.
the code that is being
Correct.
written so
Correct.
that when things break,
That's
we're
right.
not just like, we don't know what happened. And then
That's right.
three, we need accountability. So somebody that is reviewing the code that approved this, and then the engineer that wrote it, we can go to both of them and say, hey, like, what's going on here? This thing broke our system in this way or that way, right?
Yeah, by the way, you laid out three, and I'll kind of echo those three, but in a slightly different way back to you, right? So yes, one part of it I would put on security, right? You want the review to basically keep your company protected because that's a huge element of trust. The other element of trust is quality. Even in our own organization, like I said, we're always customer zero, right? But we've seen, and I've been a champion of this topic in our organization to talk about, let's not let's make sure we maintain the level of quality that we need to maintain even as we start using AI. It's very easy, like someone generates a piece of analysis from AI and it looks beautiful and it is structured, and it's got the bullet points and the icons and the pretty slides, but when you actually read the lines, like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Hmm.
And no human if a human had created this, they would have easily, like, no, they wouldn't even, it wouldn't even made it past. But somehow we're trusting AI. I was reading an article yesterday that actually talked about how there was massive study that was done that was actually talking about trust in AI. The more you use AI, the more you tend to trust it, and the less you actually validate what it does. And then the quality gets progressively worse and worse. No one wants to find themselves in that kind of a situation. The last thing I'll say is this, which I think is a really important point that you made. This is the importance of context, tribal knowledge, and what actually people bring to the table. Because AI can solve a problem for today. AI cannot necessarily solve a problem for the future when, you're trying to kind of like drive new innovation, bring new ideas. You're trying to kind of have the next rung of people, the next generation of people kind of entering the workforce to be able to manage things. If you don't have those people being grown through the system, AI is going to go nowhere. Companies will go nowhere, right? You have got to have a path for that, right? So in the Hitachi context, what this means is, like I said, our core competence or the biggest value that we bring to the table is the domain knowledge. I used that word earlier, right? Domain knowledge and context. People that deeply, deeply, deeply understand the operations. You can never take them out of the equation because that's going to be valuable not just today, but 10 years from now and 20 years from now.
We normally close with like, what's your closing advice for people out there in the builders? And it sounds like what you're saying is like, don't lose your secret sauce. Pay attention to your business. Learn how it works. Figure out the train does this. You need to
That's right.
control it in this sort of way, and like stay close to the problem and
That's
actually
right.
read the stuff that you put out.
Right. I think you stated it well. I'll put it this way. Number one, think think of think of whose problem you're actually trying to solve. Like what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve, and how that problem evolves over time, right? When you actually connect yourself to a real use case and real value, you realize that some of the discussions that you're having, like, okay, am I measuring number of tokens and all of that, it becomes totally beside the point, right? You would architect workflows and value chains and all of that to be able to deliver value. AI becomes a tool in that. AI doesn't become the end goal. The second thing that I'll say is everyone needs to switch from being a thinking like short term to thinking more long term. If you are a leader in an organization and you're trying to solve, hey, I need AI productivity in the next 12 months, but you're not thinking about what the shape of your organization looks like 5 years and 10 years from now in the context of all of this evolution, I'm sorry, you're doing a bad job as a leader,
Well,
right?
like, just to push that back there, because we hear this a lot. I think a lot of executives deal with anxiety
Yeah,
because things are moving so fast. Or like, I don't know what the next 12 months looks
that's
like
right.
globally for my market, for my customers.
That's
How,
right.
like, I guess, like, how do you kind of reckon with that? Things are moving so fast in the space, just broadly. Like, how do you
Yeah.
reckon with trying to predict into an area of uncertainty?
Listen, it's a fair question, right? And I think we have to parse between controllables and non-controllables, or between tacticals and bigger picture things, right? Tacticals would be, all right, the nature of what is possible with technology will continue to evolve. How fast, how much, all of that stuff, right? Quantum computing is going to come sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, and that'll again be a big, big, big revolution, right? But if you think of, to your point, Doyle, that you were bringing up, right? What's the core value of the company? If I believe that there's an essence of my core value that's going to stay intact or going to evolve around that perimeter 5, 10, 15 years from now, how do I protect that core value
Hmm.
and build the right knowledge systems, technology systems, and other systems around it? People can evolve, technology can evolve, other things can evolve, but you have to still have a picture that ties it all together. And I think, for example, today people are completely forgetting about people in the context of focus on technology evolution, right? People are completely forgetting about creativity and ideation and new ideas. I put it, this is an oversimplistic way of putting it, right? But I say the way LLMs are built and trained, you can train it on the entire body of human knowledge up to this point, and you can keep training it, but it is perpetually backward looking. For our world to evolve, where are you building the capabilities to look forward? Right. And I think, that's maybe a fundamental question we can leave. But for me, that's one of the interesting things about how Hitachi thinks. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but Hitachi's planning cycles are not just 1 year, 3 year plans as others do. Hitachi actually starts from the big question of where is the world going to be 50 or 70 years from now? And they've got a very expert, deep thinking think tank that is working through these ideas, big megatrends. Things like, climate change and socio-political unrest and the demographic divide and challenges with physical and other resources and so on. And you're saying, if these are going to be the big trends shaping the world 50 to 70 years from now, how can I work back from there to say, what can I work on today that can help us in that direction? How does it change how I structure and operate my organization? And I think not everyone needs to think 50 and 70 years from now, but at least think beyond the next quarter, the next year, have a clear idea of what your core is, and I think that'll help you progress. Yeah.
Love it.
I absolutely love it. That was great. Well, thank you, Simon. This is fantastic. I'm sure we did all sorts of planning on what we were going to talk about, and your team, was reviewing our prep talk, and we went all over the place. So I'm sure they're very
All good
happy about that. But
conversation. Yeah,
that's what a good conversation is, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm very glad we got to do this. Thank you for your
Same
time,
here. I
and hopefully we
appreciate
get
it.
to have you back a year from now and
Yeah,
hear
awesome.
everything
Yeah.
that's new.
Yeah, and congratulations to you guys for what you're doing, and appreciate the conversation. I hope it's helpful to everyone who listens as well.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, cheers. Take care.